Next, from Springfield, our one-on-one conversation with former Illinois Governor Dan Walker. Governor Walker recently authorized his autobiography entitled The Maverick and the Machine. In the book, Governor Walker recounts his rise to the top of the legal profession, his run for governor, fights with Mayor Richard Daley, and later, his serving time in a federal prison. Governor Walker is interviewed by our contributing correspondent, Sieracki. This runs about 30 minutes.
Good evening. Welcome to the Illinois Channel. Our guest today is Governor Dan Walker, former governor of Illinois. Dan, thank you very much for being with us today.
Bernie, thank you for inviting me. I tell you, I feel like I'm at home again as soon as I got down here because I'm back in downstate.
This is. I was thinking about our chat today, and I was thinking. I remember that cold January day when you were inaugurated in 1973, and you used a phrase in your speech. You said, "The free ride is over." What did you mean by that?
I meant that I wanted to try to start the process of stopping pay-to-play government and politics in the state of Illinois. I tried to, and I said I was going to, stand tall on ethics in terms of state government, and I did. I issued a series of very tough executive orders, and I said I would in that speech in order to clean up and elevate the ethics standards of the state. And those orders, one of them said to the people under the governor, that's about 70,000 employees and the agencies under the governor, you shall not require a state employee to get out there and raise campaign contributions. You shall not do that. And it was enforced for 4 years. And when I left office, that order was rescinded, and no governor since then has had the guts to follow my lead in terms of saying, you shall not do these things.
One of the reasons for your visit to Springfield these days is your new book, The Maverick and the Machine, and
here it is.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that.
Sure.
When did you become a maverick, or when did you realize that you were a maverick in the political arena?
Well, some who know me well say that I was born a maverick. My father was an East Texas character, a fiercely independent guy, and I had developed a strong sense of independence. Bernie, I don't like kowtowing to people, and I made up my mind a long time ago when I first came into this state and got interested in politics that I would never kowtow to the boss of the Chicago machine. And I watched governors before me do that. Democratic governors do that when they didn't have to do that, but they did. And I said, I will not kowtow to the mayor of the city of Chicago.
You're a graduate of the Naval Academy. When did you graduate from?
In the year 1945, I graduated from the Naval Academy. And you know, that was one of my problems, Bernie, when I went to prison. The warden was a graduate of West Point. And I'll never forget the day when he saw me standing in the chow line, and he saw I was wearing a ring, and he came over to me and said, take it off. And I said, no. He said again, Walker, take off that ring. I said, no way. He said, get him. And so the guards surrounded me and pushed me down on the ground and stripped that ring off. Again, those were trying days. I was humiliated. I know what it's like to be told by a guard, okay, Walker, take off all your clothes and we'll search all cavities. Those are demeaning and humiliating things, and they happen not just to me, but to others also. And a lot of people have heard that phrase, country club prison, FedEx, that kind of thing. And I want to say to you, anybody who reads this book will never use that phrase again.
When you left the Naval Academy, you did some active duty then.
Yes, I was in the Navy actually for 10 years because I was enlisted for 3 years before I went to the Academy.
And then you went to law school afterwards, and
Yes. And then I was called back for Korea for another 2 years.
Where'd you go to law school at?
At Northwestern in Chicago.
And then you began practicing law in Chicago? Or?
Well, in between, I became law clerk to the Chief Justice of the United States, Fred Vinson. And I also worked as a Deputy Chief Commissioner of the United States Court of Military Appeals. And then I went back in the Navy for the time of Korea, and then I settled down and practiced law.
I want to ask you a little bit about the Walker Report.
Yes.
How were you approached to take part in what eventually became the Walker Report? How were you recommended, and what was your attitude towards that entire incident?
I was then president of the Chicago Crime Commission and a member of what you would call the business establishment in Chicago. And Lloyd Cutler, the executive director of the President's Commission on Violence, called me and asked me to assemble a team and do a report on what had actually happened out there on the streets in Chicago. And I had read some of it, not a lot about it, and so I had an open mind when I went into it. And I was predisposed, actually, somewhat in favor of law and order. But after we looked at the films and got first-hand reports, not newspaper reports, just first-hand reports from people on the scene about the absolutely terrible violence that was used, I had to and did come to the conclusion that a minority of policemen engaged in what could only be called a police riot. But it was a minority, and I said that very clearly. The majority of the policemen were fine. But the violence that occurred just could not be condoned. The name of the book was Rights in Conflict, the rights of people to demonstrate arrayed against the rights of law and order, a problem that is faced in demonstrations right down to this day.
What was the reaction of Mayor Daley to you personally at that?
He was very unhappy. I paid a courtesy call on him, well, not a courtesy call, a fact-gathering call on him during my study. And then, and he did not have much to offer. Actually, Bernie, Mayor Daley and I never really learned how to communicate with each other. We were worlds apart. I was a kid from California, an independent-minded cuss, and he didn't understand independent politics at all. He was totally wound up in organization politics. And so we just didn't communicate. And that's unfortunate, but that was a fact of life.